This is a Main Hustle Media podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Jackie O and you're listening to Militantly Mixed.
Yo, this is Rashani from the Single Simulcast. And when I'm not making you laugh or making up parody songs, I'm kicking back, listening to Militantly Mixed.
I would like to acknowledge that the Militantly Mixed podcast is recorded on the traditional lands of the Chumash and the Tongva people, and I wish to pay my respects to the people of those nations, both past and present. Hey y'all, welcome to Militantly Mixed, the podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. I am your host, Charmaine, aka MixedGirlMane, the busiest mixed race, bisexual, polyamorous, atheist, comic book nerd, cat mom podcaster in this podcasting game. Unfortunately, I am recording on a voice memo on my phone at the moment, even though I have my new system and everything. Reason being is I actually did record a different intro over the weekend to put to this episode. There was a few things I was really excited about that I wanted to share with y'all, and it's kind of fallen apart, those things, since then. So rather than put that out there and then have to retract it, I just decided to re-record an intro, and I'm recording in my room right now on my phone like a goober. just to reintroduce this episode, since the other things that I was reporting on are kind of in limbo or shifting or just totally dead. Yeah, so that's it. I'm not gonna say anything more about that because that is what it is, and it's got me down. My guest this week is Ivy. They have been participating in the social distancing hangouts for the last 6 or 7 weeks that we've been doing it, and over the course of time, got a chance to get to know them a little bit, and then I asked, I think a few weeks ago, I had asked if anybody in the social distancing group felt like they wanted to come on the show. And Ivy was one of the people who said they wanted to come on the show. So we got a chance to do our interview. And it was really great for me in that it is a conversation with another mixed person from different heritages than I come from, different cultural background and different regional background. So I was just learning a whole lot that is new to me from my own experience, which is one of the things that I love most about doing this show, is getting to meet people that come from different places, who come from different ethnic groups, whose mixed experience is a lot different from mine, so that I can broaden my perspective on mixedness as well. So I'm really happy to share this episode with you. And shout out to Ivy for participating. Over the last 6 or 7 weeks of doing the social distancing virtual hangout, I have gathered, or I'm assuming, Ivy is a little bit on the shy side. And also that they've never or rarely have had a chance to speak about their own mixedness or mixed ideas to other mixed people. It's not a frequent opportunity or availability for them, like it is for a lot of us. So to get a chance to talk to them and for them to share their story with me means a lot. I feel this very heavily every time I speak to another person for the show, because I've been telling my story over and over again for a really long time now, and some of y'all who have accessed the show haven't. And so it's not lost on me, the weight of telling, the weight of sharing for me. And I really appreciate it, and I'm really happy to be able to share this episode with you. In terms of sort of the announcements or the logistical things that I normally talk about, PayPal and Patreon and stuff like that, I still am kind of backing off on that a little bit, because I know it's a difficult time still for everybody, and not everybody's back to work, or if they are able to work, it's still, uncertain times. So if you do still feel like you want to participate in that, it is available to you, and it's always in the show notes. But I'll try not to hype it too much in the near future, just while we all try to adapt to what life is like right now. And I hope your stamina is doing well, and your mental health is doing well, and you have self-care techniques to look after yourselves right now, because I know it's tough. I definitely was slipping on my self-care for a while, and part of that had to do with my environment not being comfortable, or my normal environment, and so I'm trying to reorganize my home so that I can feel that way again. I did have that over the weekend a little bit. I got to take a break, push the pause button basically, and self-care a little bit. So I felt good over the weekend, but I'm a little bit bummy today again. So, it comes and goes all the time. But I do want to encourage everybody who hasn't yet, if you want to participate in the social distancing virtual hangouts and you're not a member of our Facebook group, that is the best way to access the link right now, is to be a member of the Facebook group, and you'll get direct access to the link. I'm trying to keep it publicly locked down as possible because of the news that I've been hearing for the last few weeks of, I guess, haters breaking in and hacking into people's Zoom calls just to harass them and throw hate speech at them and stuff like that. So that's the best way to access it. But I know that not everybody's on Facebook. So if you aren't on Facebook, but you are, you've been with the show for a while, you've been listening, you maybe follow us on Instagram or Twitter, but you're not just on Facebook, then send me an email or slide into my DMs and let me know that you want to participate, and I'll send you the link that way. Just because I want to make sure that this space is a safe space for us. Militantly Mixed is a for us, by us, from us podcast. I want it to be a safe space for mixed people. I want mixed people to be contributing, and that's really important to me. So if you want to participate but you're not on Facebook, email me at charmaine@militantlymixed.com. S as in Sam, HAR, M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, E, @militantlymixed.com, or slide into the DMs on Twitter and Instagram, and, just let me know you want to participate, and I'll send you that link. And the group is, as far as I'm concerned, still going strong. We have a lot of regulars now, which is awesome. Last week we had a lot of new folks. This past weekend, it was mostly, I think last weekend was all regulars. So come on in, meet some other mixed folks, chat about your mixedness. And we do have a pretty good topic, I think, next week that was sort of brought up and introduced during this week. So I'm looking forward to it. But I think I'm going to go ahead and call that my intro for today, just because it's, sometimes it's just one of those kind of days, and that's what it was for me today. I hope y'all are doing okay. I hope you're taking care of yourself, not just the washing your hands and wearing the face masks and quarantining if you can, but finding some way to find normalcy. Over the weekend, I was able to get my couch back and hang out on it and watch TV and just kind of decompress from not having access to that space. And I didn't realize until recently how important that space was to me and in terms of my mental health and my self-care routine. But having it over the weekend was really helpful. And even though I didn't get to go outside and go to the beach with the weather hot and everything like that, that little nugget of time that I had on my couch this weekend lifted me up for a bit. It was really wonderful to have that normalcy. So find little nuggets of normalcy where you can, and take care of yourselves, and we will be back next week. But without further ado, please help me welcoming our latest cousin to the Militantly Mixed family, Ivy. And all right, I still am not smooth in my entry. So I'm always just like, all right, we've been talking for 15 minutes. Let's start the show. All right, so we're back, and my guest this week is Ivy. Ivy's been participating in our social distancing virtual hangout. What do I call it? Social distancing virtual hangouts every week. Mm-hmm. You've been joining us from there. Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody, and let's get into it.
All right, so my name's Ivy. I am 24 years old. I'm from Minnesota, and so I am biracial. My dad's side of the family is from India, and then my mom's side of the family is mostly German and like a tiny bit Irish. So,
Is that like the Germans that settled up in that area and just kind of stayed German, or is it just general white that the origin is Germany?
I think it's just like the general origin is just German. So, yeah.
Because I know there's still some communities up there like Wisconsin and Minnesota that like stayed German somehow.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't even really know how to start, because for me, and
an Indian white hybrid that isn't in England surprises me.
I know, right? Yeah, that's the problem I was having too. So yeah, so my grandpa on my dad's side and my grandparents, so they both came to the US in the 1960s, and as like I think it was right after like the some like immigration act or something opened up.
Right.
So like that would let more like Asian people into the country. And so he was doing he went to the university, where is it? I think it was Johns Hopkins.
Okay, Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, so and then he my grandma moved here. So, and then actually they were the, like, I think when they were because they lived in sort of like the northern suburbs of Minneapolis, and so like they were really influential in like the like forming like the because there's like a Hindu temple that's up there kind of, and so they were really instrumental in helping that get along and stuff.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
And so, then you grow up being predominantly white presenting, but like clearly something, do you get people notice that there's something not all the way white with you?
Yeah, I do get that a lot. I think actually that has happened before. Like I was it's usually my name. My last name is a very common Indian last name. It's like Smith or Jones in India. So like people will see that and go, huh, that's, what's up with that? Somebody actually asked me that, what's up with your name? Like, I don't know, it's just my name. So.
Well, also in thinking about timing as so when your grandparents came here, there was also sort of this like white people sort of turning towards Hinduism or Buddhism and things like that, like in commune style living. And I think like the Rajneeshis started around that time, but then they eventually moved here in the 80s and things. So there could also be that someone looks at you and they're like, oh, you're one of those white folks that became Hindu or something like that. And so how have you managed? Like how have you been your little mixed ass self growing up and having the name that you have and everything?
It was really weird, I think, for me, because like I always my mom was always telling us, oh, you're half Indian, half white, and I'd be like, okay, but what does that mean? So I guess I didn't understand it. So yeah,
because like, with your mom you don't get to access the other side that much.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like she didn't really, I mean, I love my mom, I do, but I mean she didn't exactly know how to like deal with her two biracial kids. So yeah.
Does your sibling present similar to you, or?
Yeah, my brother, he's 3 years older than me, and we look like exactly the same. So
oh,
like,
really?
we both have like the green eyes, brown hair and stuff, so we both get freckles. But like it's funny because we both kind of have similar like lighter skin and stuff, but like he gets sunburnt way more easily, and I tan. Yeah, I tan a lot more in the summer, so it's really funny. So
that's funny. So growing up, what did you think you understood besides just that your mom told you that you were half Indian?
Let's see. I think it was like it always felt like for me growing up that I wasn't enough of either side, because it just felt like there wasn't a way to like talk about both of these things at once. It was like neither side really knows how to talk about the other one, if that does that make sense.
100%.
Yeah, so I hear that that's a common thing with a lot of other mixed people. So
when did you start trying to, because I know you've been participating in the virtual hangouts and stuff like that, but when before this did you try to start accessing sort of like your full mixedness?
I think it was probably like college. So because I think the thing that I was having the most difficulty with was I didn't realize I could also call myself an Asian person, because there seems to be this idea that India isn't in Asia, which I don't understand. It's like, well, where do you think it is exactly? Right? It's not just floating in space.
Yeah.
So it's like, and would you say that like like the people who say that, I'm like, would you say that like Nepal or Bangladesh or any of those other countries, are they not Asian too? So it's like, I don't get it. So that
Well,
was the main
especially here
comment.
in the States, because in the UK, that's not a thing. Like they understand Indian and,
Yeah.
well, the subcontinent altogether as being a
Mm-hmm.
part of Asia.
Mm-hmm.
But here, if you don't look like Japanese, Chinese, and Koreans, then you're not. Like, what are you then? It's sort of the thing that happens, I think, here, which is ridiculous. And then of course there's the decision of saying like, okay, or the way of saying like, okay, these people are South Asians or they're Asians or they're Southeast
Mm-hmm.
Asians. But again,
Mm-hmm.
the lines can be really blurry where that is concerned to even decide who gets to claim what region of Asia
Right.
they
Yeah.
get to say. So
Yeah.
how are you received though when you do claim out loud your biracial white and Asian identity?
Mm, I think it does go over pretty well. Well, actually, I do have a story. So I was going to a wedding. One of my friends got married this past summer, and I was staying at a hotel, and like I had to show the guy my ID, and he was just like, "Oh, this is an Indian last name. Are you Indian?" And I'm like, "Yes." And
Oh,
so,
nice.
and he's just like, "Cool." And I'm just like, "Huh? I guess like my name is like my currency." So it's
Right.
like, yeah,
That's your like credential point for
yeah,
some people. That's
yeah.
interesting because
Mm-hmm.
that's one aspect of like, I think I've said it in one of the group chats. When I started the show, I kind of thought about mixedness in one particular way, not really realizing that I thought about it like a monolith. And so as I meet other mixed people, or I meet mixed people that are from different ethnic groups than I am, and hear like, what is the point? Like, what's the thing that someone would look at you and be like, oh, I see it, da 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 da, this is what it is. Like, I know what it is from the Black side. I still don't know what it is from the Japanese side because no Japanese has ever in their life looked at me and thought I was Japanese, even if I'm speaking Japanese or I'm eating correctly or whatever. But for someone like you, like I wonder, as you walk around, like what are the things where someone would see you and validate you? Like what is your Indian equivalent to the Black head nod?
Hmm.
Because
Let's
I'm
see.
only putting it in context that I personally understand.
Yeah, I don't know what, I'm not really sure. I just know like whenever I see other people who look like vaguely South Asian or some kind of, yeah, so and I'm just like, huh, you look like family to me. So it's just
Right.
like, yeah, I see your facial features like, and I'm like, yeah, we have the same kind of face going on there.
Okay.
So
Have you seen many other mixed Indian white kids growing up that you could kind of look at them and be like, hey, they might be like me, besides
mm,
the brown? Like, I know it's a lot easier to pinpoint brown, but when you just see like another mixed person, do you see it and get excited? Like, oh, they look like me.
kind of. Yeah, well, I didn't really see a lot of mixed Indian kids, except for my cousins, and they were
Sure.
born. They're a lot younger than me. So, because my dad has two sisters, or he had two sisters. One of my aunts just passed away,
Mm.
but his younger sister has she married a white man, and they have two little kids, and they both look fairly lighter presenting. So, um, yeah. But other than that, no, I was having a hard time trying to see other mixed Indian kids.
Yeah.
So yeah, most of
So,
like I do have a friend who's both her parents are from India, so we got along really well
mm.
growing up. We could talk about that. So yeah.
Do you have any of the kind of things that are sort of culturally idiosyncratic of people? Like I always describe it that when I am, say, at the Japanese grocery store or something like that, or I am around other Japanese people, my body like shifts. Like I kind of hunch over and I kind of get into a physical deference position because that's sort of how I was trained by that side of my family. Or depending on if I'm around Black folks or if I'm around British white folks or something like that, like my physical demeanor in addition to my demeanor shifts. Do you have things like that you could connect with, or if you see other Indian people that you identify and that also validates that's my cat. I thought they were all out. They're not. So going back into it, sort of things that are sort of idiosyncratic of the people that you grew up around, like reflective of, if not your family, then other people that you know from your culture, where you kind of see it and identify and kind of feel a validation when you're around people?
Let's see. Well, I know this might just be specific to like Hinduism, but like whenever there were like parties and stuff, people would always greet their elders by going like this, like holding their like hands up to their chest like that and saying, you know, namaste, whatever. And it's like that's is a sign of respect to your elders and whatever. Yeah.
So, okay, so now you're 24 and you're living your mixed ass life, but how do you, besides your last name, like how are you choosing, like how are you actively choosing to engage, I guess, in terms of, because you probably don't have a whole lot of German cultural things because it's more of American whiteness and stuff like that, right? Okay, so
Yeah.
how are you accessing all of your cultures and trying to feel more like a complete mixed person? Because I feel like that's the journey for all of us, is like, how do I make all these pluses feel whole?
Yeah, I think it's like, for me, the thing that's helped the most is food and music. So,
those are my big ones.
Yeah, I love eating Indian food. It's just it feels like home to me. So yeah, because like my grandma always makes a lot of like traditional foods and stuff whenever we were over at her house, and I was just like, oh, this is so good. And so yeah, I got to learn how to make some because I'm not really the best cook, but
right.
I want to learn how to make it. So I think yeah, like the other thing is I'm also big tea person, so I love drinking chai, and so that's I like how you can go to pretty much any coffee shop now and order some, and so it's like that's good, except it's not quite the same as grandma.
It's never quite the same, right? Yeah, it's just like you know, I did talk a little bit on the group chat about my tea stuff and how just like they just do it wrong here. Like I don't know what else to say. It's like you just do it wrong here. Everything. It is funny how it's like you get excited because it's there, but at the same time, it's just not quite right. And you need something. Like I think as mixed people, there's just these moments where like I need this to be right so bad.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you're just reminding me that I'm not 100% of whatever this cultural access point is. So it's just like I just need you to get this right. Like, please give me my British tea or my Japanese tea right, or whatever the thing is. Like there's just these moments that you feel like that. And then music wise, what kind of music connects you the most?
Yeah, so I listen to a lot of Bhangra music, which is like Indian dance music, and it's typically like northern India, because I'm pretty sure that's where my family is from, so northern India. My grandpa was actually technically born in Pakistan, but it was considered India at the time because there's that whole partition of India and stuff. So yeah, but yeah, so that there's this group that I like that's that are on SoundCloud. They're called DJ Anjali and the Incredible Kid, and it's so cool because it's like they combine a lot of like Hindi music and then also like Spanish. There's also Spanish music in there too, and so I'm like, oh, this is so cool. That's so it's fun. Just like a mashup. So
how does it feel in your body when you hear music from back home or whatever it is? Like what happens to you?
Oh, it's just like it feels like home again. It's like your whole body was like relaxed. So it's like, oh yes, this is so good. Like especially like the drum beat and stuff. So yeah, that's cool.
I find myself being, I guess more specifically, both the Japanese side and the black side, like drums are a big part of both of those music. But in the last year, I've discovered that my African origin is actually from Gabon and particular tribes from Gabon. So I started going to YouTube to be like, maybe there's music from these tiny little tribes that I'm from. And the second, you know, you hear something, it's just like something like the shoulders are relaxed, like something all the way through your body just feels like I remember this. Even though I've never heard it before, you know, like my blood is telling me it remembers this music and it feels really good. All right. So you're connecting with food and music to the best of your ability. You don't cook yet, which fair.
I can do
burn
omelets.
You can do omelets.
Yes.
I can burn my hands anytime I attempt to cook something. What's the population like where you're at? Like how, if you wanted to just randomly in a day have a very Indian day, how do you do that where you're at?
Well, there are like a couple of restaurants nearby, so that's one that's one way to do it. But I think actually there's like I went to an Indian grocery store that's like in my hometown, and so it's
Oh, nice.
like I got like a whole thing of tea, and it was like 70 tea bags for like $4. I was like, dang, this is a steal. So,
yeah, I think going to cultural grocery stores helps a lot. I've moved
yeah.
to an area where there's 2 Japanese grocery stores near me, and it's the first time I've lived that close to them. Whenever I've moved around the country, my grandma would send me like a care package every couple months that would have all of my favorite things or whatever. But there's something just feels so good when you get to have those kinds of access points. What other you said you had a couple of things that you did want to come in chatting about. What did you have?
Yeah, so actually I did want to mention like the whole like asexuality and aromanticism and like how that combines with being mixed.
Okay, right. So like, we've talked this off air, but we didn't jump into it, but we wanted to talk about intersectionality a little bit. And so as I guess reintroducing yourself a little bit, why don't you kind of talk about how you identify, and then we'll get into it from there.
Yes. So I am asexual and aromantic, and then I'm also non-binary. Okay. So yep. So I generally just use the word queer because that's easier to explain.
Mm-hmm. I grew up in a time when queer was the bad word, the word that was used against us. So I appreciate and respect the reclamation, but I do still struggle with the term. So if you don't mind me asking, and you can totally not answer it if you don't want, can you explain to me a little bit? It just totally has nothing to do with militantly mixed, but can you explain to me a little bit, like how do you access the word queer, and how does it feel to be able to claim it?
Let's see. I think when I first heard the word like in like an academic context, because like I took a lot of like queer theory classes when I was at school, and so that's kind of how I found it. I never really heard anyone use that as like a derogatory term. Usually, like for me, I think the word people used to throw like gay and lesbian as like a more of a derogatory term. So yeah.
So it's okay. Yeah. So okay, that helps me understand how to talk with it too, because I say like in school I did take queer theory, queer film, things like that. And so like in the academic context I was comfortable using it, but when I was using it to describe myself, it was just like it tenses me up because of the time period. I'm like twice your age almost. So it's tough to understand it, and yet I can use it in these contexts. But like this weekend, actually right now, I'm supposed to be in Vegas at Calexicon, which is like one of the biggest queer women's geek festivals or conferences, which obviously I can't be there because thanks to coronavirus. But I've been trying to actively engage with people that were also going to be going to this thing and talking about like queerness and, being queer. And it is such a struggle for me. So I'm getting out of it. I'm getting used to it. But while we talk about this aspect of intersectionality, being mixed race people, obviously we already have a built-in intersectionality, but if we're also queer, then we have a different type of thing too, because presentation, gender presentation, sexuality, non-sexuality, like all of the things end up kind of speaking, especially with queerness, that doesn't seem to happen anywhere else. You are somehow both your gender and your sexuality at the same time.
Yeah.
And that isn't necessarily how we feel about it. So let's get into it a little bit, because intersectionality is a big aspect of our lives. Do you find, as a queer identified person who is also mixed race, that there is crossover between the two experiences?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And how does it manifest for you?
It seems to be more like erasure. So people will say like, oh, asexuality isn't real or something, and they don't,
like, you just haven't found the right fill in the blank
Yeah.
gender yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like you'll get that from people who are straight, and then
Mhm.
at the same time there's like that sort of the like the LGBT community is like, we don't want you here.
Yeah,
So
why
it's
are you
like,
part of the letters, right?
yeah, so it's like the same kind of thing with like being mixed. People would say, "Oh, you're not Indian. You don't look Asian to me." And then they'll
Hmm.
also say, "Oh, but you're not actually a white person." So it's
Right.
like, yeah.
Damned
So
if you
it's
do.
yeah.
I agree with that. So even though I have one of the original letters, I'm a
Hmm.
B, I feel erasure constantly.
Hmm.
The fact that, well, I also have to hyphenate so again, another level of intersectionality. I hyphenate bisexual hyphen polyamorous because while polyamory is not a sexuality, it is my because I am married, my polyamory affords my bisexuality, like me to live my whole bisexuality, I guess is what I'm
Hmm.
saying. But like, I'm like, okay, I'm in the first four letters. The first one, like growing up, it was just LGBT. Like
Hmm.
that was all we had back when I was growing up. So like I have one of the letters, but I don't exist because I have a husband. So obviously I'm straight because I identify as a woman. Okay, great. Awesome. I don't get to, when really that's not really my real, like, if anything, I describe myself as heteromantic and homosexual. So I'm like
Hmm.
predominantly more attracted sexually to women, and I'm more relationship attracted to men. That part's my deal. So to have to sit there and try to maneuver in a queer space being a bisexual, it's like, but are you?
Yeah.
Do you belong here? And I've found myself more recently, I have a few more asexual identified friends than I've ever had before, or they're out now, I
Hmm.
guess. They weren't out before probably. And I find that the same thing with them. It's just like if they pay any amount of attention to one other human, then obviously you're not asexual because you like
Yeah.
this person or whatever.
Right.
Or even if they're partnered, if then it's the same type of thing. Well, it's like, oh, it just not a spark yet. So how do you deal with, like, well, is partnering, you say aromantic too, so is partnering
Mhm.
not an option for you, like not something that you're looking towards, or?
Well, I think for me, like the romantic part is really confusing. So
Okay.
I'm just like, I have a hard time distinguishing like what exactly is going on. So I'm just like, because like both asexuality and aromanticism are like on these spectrums, right?
Hmm.
So I think like the asexuality was a lot easier to figure out than the romantic part, because I'm just
Sure.
like, because like we live in this society that's very like romance focused.
Hmm.
So it's like, it's hard to figure out if that's something I actually wanted for myself, or if that was like just um
Like something you
yeah.
had to do because that's what society is like.
Yeah,
This is how it
exactly.
works. Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine that it would be a lot harder to come to than
Hmm.
I mean, if you've not experienced or don't automatically experience any kind of sexual attraction or sexual interest in somebody,
Hmm.
that's a pretty clear cut thing. It's
Yeah.
like, this is not happening in that respect. Like, whoa. But with the romantic side, it could just be feeling like, in that case, I just haven't found the person that I want
Hmm.
to be romantic with. So yeah, I imagine that discovery is a little harder.
Yeah.
Do you do you have a community, since the queer community as a whole does kind of segment us and decide that if we're not
Hmm.
gay white men, cis men, then we're not really part of the community?
Yeah.
um do you have a place that you get to kind of experience in the same way that, now that you're engaging with militantly mixed, you have a place where you get to be mixed? Do you have
Hmm.
a place where you can kind of be asexual, aromantic, and it not be like a, but are you sure?
Yeah, yeah. I think the thing that's helped me the most is like finding a lot of blogs to follow, and
Okay.
like listening to, but there's actually a couple of asexuality podcasts out there. And
Oh, okay.
so I've been listening to those, and that's definitely helped a lot. So like actually hearing people talk about it. So
Right.
mhm,
So at this
yeah.
podcast thing, I gotta say, like, besides the fact that doing militantly mixed has given me access more to other mixed people and stuff like that, like whatever deal you have, you can find it in a podcast. Like you can get that validation that you need. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I listen to a lot of Black nerd podcasts. I listen to a lot of true crime, like obsessed type of things. And like whatever my deal is right in that moment, the thing I'm the most into or whatever pops up and it's available. And it's so validating when you realize you're not this weird person that was like the only person where you grew up that was mixed and a nerd and queer and all this other stuff. So that's great. So you do have a space where you can kind of exercise it. How do you feel about like being out about all the things, being out as a mixed person, being out as a queer person, being out as all of the things? How do you feel about that?
Let's see. Well, I feel like I am generally pretty okay about it. So it's just like I'm like out to a lot, like pretty much all my friends on like on Facebook and stuff like that. So
Okay.
But
What about your family?
Not really. It just doesn't really seem to come up in terms of conversation. So we don't really, we don't generally talk about stuff like that. So,
but even in terms of your gender identity, do you not get to, I hate that I even said the word that way, but I'm sorry. Do you feel like you get, damn it, the word just keeps popping out of my head. Do you feel like you get, wow, I really can't find a way to say this sentence without saying get to, like it's a permission-based thing. Do you give yourself permission to be able to be expressing non-binary gender identity to your family? And
yeah, I think because I just go about my life pretty much like this. Like that, I don't really, like flannel shirts and jeans and stuff. So
and so you're like letting them fill in the blank, like however you get to.
Yeah.
Because the other thing that I think we deal with, and especially if we come from a culture, Asian cultures for sure, I haven't really experienced it on my other sides, but that pressure to partner, have children, all that kind of stuff. Does that, I'm trying to figure out like how, because in my family, it was pretty much from the jump, like from my childhood, I'm like, don't ever expect me to be married. I'll never be married. I ended up getting married because I needed health insurance, but what are you gonna do? But like, don't ever expect me to have kids, like all that kind of stuff. Like I was always saying it from like 5 years old. So by the time I became an adult and I partnered, that was the weird thing. It was like, but you've always said, and not unfortunately, but like this thing happened I didn't expect to happen when I was 22. I fell in love with someone, but still not having kids or anything like that. But the pressure was there. Like I wasn't allowed to move out unless I was going to be getting married. I ended up moving out anyway. So that kinds of stuff. Like, do you have that pressure too from your cultural sides?
Let's see. Well, I think I was concerned about that for a while. Cause like my mom tends to think that I'll grow up and get married and have kids. And that's not something that I want either. But she just doesn't seem to listen to me when I say that. So it's like, whatever, this is what you want. I can't really deal with. I'm just doing me. So
you can't take the pressure on somebody else wanting you to.
Yeah. And like I was also concerned too with like on my dad's side of the family, I was like, oh God, I hope I don't have to get like an arranged marriage or something. Cause that was my like, oh God, that would be horrible. So, cause like, I mean, that just is not something that I would want. But like, cause my dad had an arranged marriage. My grandparents had an arranged marriage. So it's like, yikes. But I don't really think that's going to happen. So, because like we're not really that close.
You're not all the way in. So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But so what was the thing that kind of got you wanting to seek out sort of the mix? Well, at least with the mixed community, but it may also mirror in the other communities. Like what made you start seeking it out? Access.
Let's see. I think it was just trying to find people who I could relate to, and especially with the asexuality thing, because it's such a small community. Especially it seems to be mostly online communities, but I'm seeing more like in pride parades and stuff. They're including more ace stuff, so that's good. But yeah, so just like
also your flag has the best colors.
Right, I'm wearing the ace flag right now. The shirt has the ace flag on it.
That's nice. Yeah, I'm envious of the colors because for my bisexual flag it has pink, which like I get it, but also I hate pink. So
oh yeah, that's funny. Actually, I for a time before I realized I was ace, I thought I was also bisexual because I was like, oh, I am attracted to all genders, as in none at all.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, that's funny because I had a conversation recently. So a friend of mine also identifies as ace, and they are married in a heterosexual presenting relationship, but the ace stuff is strong, you know, like it's just like they have, so they're not aromantic, but they are asexual. And the way they were describing their experience was just this constant state of pressure of like having to commit publicly to a sexuality, you know, or whatever. And they said something really similar where it was kind of like, I'm ace. The way they said it was, I'm ace. I can literally never have sex in my whole life and be totally fine, and that would be comfortable. That being said, if I partnered with a man or a woman or a non-binary person or whatever, it literally wouldn't matter. Like, because the same amount of sexual impulse is coming from whatever gender. So it was really more, in that case, partnering with a person that they liked, basically. Like that was about it. But their partner is actually concerned that they might leave them for a woman one day. And it was just like, but literally it doesn't matter. Like, I don't want to have sex with you either. You know, like, I mean, I don't know if she ever said that, but you know, but basically it's something like that of just like, I don't want to have sex with anybody. So it doesn't matter if we break up and I end up with a woman, like, or a man, because like the same amount of sexual interest is happening regardless.
Exactly.
I wonder if a lot of other ace identified people go through that bisexual stage only because it's just like, it's not work. Like nothing's hitting anywhere. Like this guy, this girl, like nothing's hitting everywhere. So maybe it's just about finding, because we don't have a society that's like really granting that it's okay and not weird if you don't actually have that
sexual attraction.
Sexual attraction, yeah. Like if you just don't have sexual attraction, like you just don't have it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Exactly. Yeah.
But our society is so built that like, that's the progress. You get old enough that you can partner, you start having sex, you start having babies, blah, 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 blah. And for me, like, it took me a while to be able to feel comfortable too with my identity, because the longest time I think like a lot of bisexual people, I thought I was straight, and then I kept having these dreams about these girls, and I was just like, why am I having, it's because I want to look like her. You know, and that was the thing. It's like, clearly I want to look like her because I'm ambiguous, and you know, you can't identify me. My mixed raceness is all over the place. But that girl, like, if I look at her, she knows exactly, like, you know exactly what she is. So I want to look like her. But then I would wake up with a sex dream, and I'm like, why do I keep dreaming sexually about these people I want to look like? But again, it was me trying to figure, like, I was coming from a society that was telling me I was straight, and that like bisexuality wasn't even a thing. I barely knew lesbians existed. Like barely knew lesbians existed.
Me too.
Because if they weren't like butch presenting, there was no way to understand that it was possible to be any other kind of woman that was also interested in women. It took a long damn time for me to figure out that that's what my deal was. And then once I figured it out, I could go back in my memory all the way. And I'm like, oh, so many more things make sense now. But again, because our society doesn't teach us that there's more than one option, or at least there's more than the binary option, that you can express it. And I'm like half jealous and half really excited about what's happening in the world right now, like that non-binary people are all the way out and being able to express any kind of way, like androgynous or super femme or super masculine or whatever. Like, it's making me so happy to see it, because
me too.
Like my internal presentation that I imagine when I think about how I am is like some kind of a mix between like a dapper femme type person. Like that would be my aesthetic if I could like afford to live my truth. But like my whole life I was just like trained against that, because women don't wear suits and women don't do this.
Oh my god, I love wearing suits.
A woman in a suit is the hottest thing.
Yes, I agree. Because I can recognize that people are like physically attractive, like aesthetically pleasing, but for me I think that's about as far as it goes.
Right, like, so. It's just, that's a beautiful thing. And that makes it, because like for me, I remember my Japanese grandmother was really obsessed with American movies, and it all dates back to World War II. The propaganda is telling her that she's a child, and the propaganda was telling her Americans are cannibals. If Americans come, you got to kill yourself with poison. They'll eat you and they'll die too. But when the Americans actually came, they gave her chocolate, and she fell in love with Americans at that point, because she was just like, oh, Americans aren't cannibals, they bring chocolate. So she grew up obsessed with Americans, and then started watching American movies. She thought she's going to marry Clark Gable, and she ended up finding an American to marry and come to the States. And so she continued in this interest of American movies, and we would watch them together, older movies together. And Marlena Dietrich pops up on screen one day, and she's in a tuxedo, and I'm just like, in a world that bisexual and non-binary and all that kind of stuff wasn't spoken about yet, that image spoke all the way to my body. Like I would think I was like maybe 10 or 9, like somewhere in that age group, just like, I get that, like there's something about that that's calling to me, but I didn't know what it was. And then as I got older and like went to film school and got to see the movie again, and I started to realize, like, if there was a way that I could walk around in a lady tux all the time, that would be my deal. Like that would be my aesthetic. And it just took forever to be able to get to a point. And even like my 20s, I've been out as a bisexual person almost all the way throughout my 20s, 30s, and now into my 40s. And it's only now that I feel 100% like I get my whole deal. But that's because it took younger generations to be out about things that we weren't allowed to be out about before. That it's just like, oh, okay. So I find myself now leaning closer to a more non-binary mindset about my gender, whereas like, I guess I'm comfortable in saying like a female bodied, but there's so much about me that has, you know, masculine mindset and like different things like that I feel like it's okay if I feel comfortable if I identify on the women's spectrum, but I also feel comfortable on the non-binary spectrum. And honestly, for me, any pronoun works. If you call me he, she, or they, it doesn't matter, because my Japanese grandmother called all of us the opposite, because her pronouns were different, translating them into English. So girls were always he and boys were always she. So like gender pronouns never really affected me that much. So I can be called he, she, they, and all of them feel comfortable for me.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel too. So, cause like I don't really feel strongly at all about gender. I just exist inside this body that happens to be gendered by society a specific way. But I'm just like this genderless being floating around in this world.
And you're comfortable in your aesthetic too, so that you're presenting yourself the way that makes most sense and feels most comfortable. That's great. Do you feel like, I know I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but do you feel like you learn lessons in terms of understanding your identity through your mixedness or through your sexuality or through your gender identity? Is there a crossover? Of course, does like learning something about what it's like to be a mixed person inform any aspect of your gender identity or your sexuality, or vice versa?
Let's see. Well, actually, so one thing is like, I know with a lot of like traditional Indian clothing, it's very gendered. And so like you get like the long flowing saris and lengas and all that stuff. And so I felt like in order to connect with my culture, I had to like embody this sort of like hyper feminine idea with, you know, like the long hair and like the dresses and stuff, but I'm just not comfortable with that at all. Yeah. And I'm just like, I want to see more like Indian people wearing like suits and stuff, like Indian, like femme presenting people wearing suits. I'm just like, that looks so cool. Or like traditional like Indian clothes that's like not so gendered. That's what I would like to see.
It's really funny too, because in a lot of different religious aspects, there is sort of a hybrid gendered deities and things like that. Like there you know, there's different things like that. So you would think that like if the ancient religions inform a little bit of non-binariness, you're like, can't we slip that into our culture, like our current culture? Because Native Americans also have the same type of thing. Like they actually have they have like 6 genders that they can identify comfortably. But again, society, we're sort of like having to really like jam it forward. Like this is a thing that is ancient. Like it has been here. Let us present this way without giving us all these crazy things. Have you looked into any aspects of that to like also inform your?
Yeah, so I think actually I was doing a lot of research on like Hinduism and stuff, and so it's actually like a lot more there's a lot more like gender fluidity and like sexual fluidity, because that all existed before, colonization really ruined everything. So,
it really fucking does, man.
yeah,
Jeez.
it's all the British colonization in India. So yeah, and so like now, there was that like being gay was considered a crime up until not too recently. So
right, people were recently killed from it even.
Yeah, and it's like it's all because of these laws that were imposed on them and stuff. So it's like, but this has always existed. It's just like you got to look at the history, like, and in like the ancient texts and stuff like that. There's this really great book that I want to read. I can't remember who the author is, but it's like something about like queerness and like gender fluidity in like Hindu tales, like in like because in Hinduism, like there are a bunch of different gods and goddesses and that have like that switch genders and stuff in the stories and do all kinds of stuff. So it's like, yeah, this is in here, but like we're not questioning it. So
you also wonder, like, as decolonization is kind of happening. I mean, different parts, like the British Empire isn't an empire necessarily anymore, and there's still countries that could be given back sovereignty if British like backed up a little bit more. But you also wonder, like, as decolonization happens, do these cultures get to kind of grab back those things from the past? Like, how many generations would it take to dispel that stuff that happened? So like, how long would it take to get back to gender fluidity being more common or more comfortable because it was in the past and stuff? Because now it is, unfortunately, it's a part of the story, in the same way that we talk about like the drums speaking to our blood. Like, this now becomes a part of our, and especially with us as being mixed people, we are both colonizer and colonized. Unfortunately, that's a part of our struggle, I guess, that we have to kind of deal with. And I've touched on it throughout the show a number of different times. It's hard to identify with the white side when I feel so brown, and yet technically I'm more white, percentage wise, but it's just something that is so hard to identify, and times when I'm just angry, like just angry about it, and not having a place to put it, but also wondering, like, what would I be, how comfortable would I have been in my skin had this never have happened, and things like that. And could I grab back some of that time before when I could express gender differently, I could express sexuality different, I could express even if I was still mixed, but maybe not as mixed colonizer wise, if colonization hadn't been the reason why I was mixed, I guess is the best way of saying it. It is something I think about and dwell on. I know there's nothing much I can change, but I'm curious to see, like, as we become more out as a community, as mixed race people, versus sort of identifying with what we look most like, do we get to own that back with our further generations? And of course, like, I'm not trying to have kids, so I'm not passing it on to anybody except for through my show. So I don't know, like, what that impact could be, but I'm interested to see, like, as we get to own it more and teach it to the generations that come after us, do we get out of it? Do we get out of some of those hangups that we have?
Actually, I saw, I think I'm part of another, like, mixed race group, and they were asking, like, do us mixed people who have, like, white parents, do we have to, like, or should we be paying reparations, or do we receive them or something? And I was like, that's really an interesting question. So
yeah, that is interesting. And I've been thinking about reparations lately because there has been the recent, I guess they did go to Congress to try to talk about reparations and stuff. And it's hard to figure out what the guidelines of such a thing would be. There's ideas about, like, you must at least have had one grandparent that or one ancestor that descended from slavery. in terms of Black reparations, because Japanese got reparations for internment, but I'm not internment Japanese. My Japanese came later, and yet there is still racism that impacts people that immigrated later. So do you include them as part of the reparations because the society is still going to treat them the way they treat the other people who were here before, but you chose to come here? So, or like your ancestors chose to come here versus being dragged here. And then there's the idea of like, well, you're experiencing racism, but if you chose to come here knowing this was a racist place, does that absolve you from receiving the benefit if the world is still going to treat you like they treat? It's a whole bunch of stuff, and you can understand why the debate is so crazy. But then again, if you include the mixed people, there's aspects of my mixedness that is voluntary, where people from different countries and different cultures came together and made babies. And then there's part of my mixedness that wasn't, and which is reflected in my great grandmother on my dad's side, who clearly, as a very, very light-skinned Black woman, and her parents were the last in slavery. Above those generations, somebody got raped somewhere, like otherwise they wouldn't present as light as they did. So there's it's such a messy thing.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe that's too with some of the anger about being mixed with white. So I don't have a white parent. I have 2 half-white parents.
Yeah.
And I don't know like directly what it's like to be informed by a white person. I mean, I did have my Nana around, but she wasn't around for my whole life. She didn't live with us the whole time. So I wonder too, like, what got in? Like, what of the racist ideas or anything like that? Like, what got in to me? I don't know, because I don't know how it was diluted through the generations to get into me. And even as we have parents like, in your case, being biracial with 1 white parent, 1 brown parent, there's still things that the white parents can do and say that you're just like, oh, you don't understand. Like, you don't understand what it's like for brown people and stuff. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, like when my mom or my stepdad will talk about like race or something, and they tend to like watch Fox News a lot.
Oh no.
So I'm just like, oh God, I can't change your mind.
Can't change it. You just sit there like, oh, you don't have any of your family's interest at heart.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That's I feel like my stepdad's kind of like that too. I think he's like very Republican, very like pro guns and whatever. And it's just like, yeah, okay, I get it, but also no.
Like, it's just, I'm not 100% against guns, but I am against the idea of why people want them.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
When the Second Amendment was written, it was written because you would have to form militias to protect against, other sovereignties and stuff like that. So, like, I get the idea back then. That doesn't flow to today. But then again, we have the administration that we have. And so, and with that kind of administration, you're like, oh, maybe I do need this because I might have to fight that government at some point. Like there's a whole bunch of things that make it feel really itchy where you're just like, I'm not okay with any of this, but I don't know how to express where it's comfortable to be okay and where it's comfortable not to be okay. Cause like we're following rules that were written so long ago and have nothing to do with what society. I mean, shit, when the Constitution was written, my ancestors were considered less than less than a person, like 3/4 of a person, 2/3 of a person. So it for sure isn't representing, like anything. And then to be a mixed race person also, you're like, well, see, now I feel like 2/3 of a person because, so much of what I'm mixed with can be disregarded, I guess, society-wise. As we get a little bit closer to the end of this, how do you feel having talked about being mixed?
It feels pretty good. I enjoy talking about all this mixed race stuff. I actually, I recently found out that there's like a critical mixed race studies thing. So like critical race theory. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. So I'm looking up like journal articles and like I just love reading about stuff. And so I was reading somebody's like master's thesis actually about like how universities and just like schools in general should include like mixed race studies in their like ethnic studies departments or whatever. Yeah, and it was like,
Absolutely.
oh, this is so cool. I really like this. Like, because when people do like their like big papers like that, they get like super personal, and it's just like, yes, this is
Yeah.
great. I love this.
I've actually had some guests on the show that have focused their higher degrees on like mixed race studies or something to the degree, and it's just so exciting to think like it's available. It's starting to become available. I think that's what's important about doing this show too, is that we're laying a footprint for
Exactly.
mixed race people exist, and all of our stories are different. Yours and mine are totally different from each other, and yet we have some crossover in terms of like how we feel, or you know, what our gender identity might look like today versus tomorrow, you know, stuff like that.
Exactly.
I think the fact that we get to have these conversations really do just help, and like I'm looking forward to seeing like what happens through the next couple decades of my life, to see like, do mixed race people get to just be a thing without it being an anomaly, or just like, oh, look at you,
Yeah,
look
that
at you
that would
just
be
being
great.
mixed. All right, so
Exactly.
we're coming close to the end, and I like to ask all of my guests what they love most about being mixed. Have you thought about this at all? Are you ready to answer that question?
Yes, I have thought about this. So I think that the thing that I always love about being mixed is just being able to experience the world, and seeing through multiple different lenses. I really enjoy that. So it's like I can, and being able to like relate to different people, because like I can walk up to somebody and be like, hey, I'm mixed, and they'll be like, cool, let's talk about this, blah blah blah. So it's just like, yeah, it's a good way to like talk about, have deeper discussions, more dialogue, and so I do enjoy that a lot.
Yeah, we're like human bridges to
Exactly.
different cultures, so we can
Yeah,
translate for other people.
Yeah, but we can't fix racism. That's
We
for sure.
can't fix racism. Thank you.
No.
Yeah, we're not the solve for that. But I do appreciate you joining in. I'm so glad that you've been participating in the virtual hangouts. I think, especially now that as we've grown so much, you know, you got a fellow mixed white and Indian person on the last session. So like, there's starting to be ways in which we can connect across people that are, you know, might have a closer connection, but at the same time generally be able to talk about these things that affect all of us as mixed people. So thank you. I'm so glad that you've been participating. I hope you continue to do it. Thank you for sharing your story with us on the show.
Yeah, I did want to mention I do write poetry, and we did include that in the link. I like writing poetry, and then I also have been writing songs on the piano, because that's something I enjoy doing.
Oh, nice.
So, yes.
So we do have those links in the show notes for everybody to check out. So check those out and support Ivy. And I mean, other than that, don't forget to be your mixed ass self.
Yes.
Militantly Mixed is a Main Hustle Media podcast, produced and hosted by me, Charmaine Fury. Music is by David Bogan the One. You can follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Militantly Mixed. If you'd like to become a sponsor of Militantly Mixed, please go to patreon.com/militantlymixed for monthly sponsorship, or paypal.me/militantlymixed for a one-time only donation. And if you like what you hear on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to be your mixed ass self. Main Hustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.